First of all, I want to ask you, yesterday we heard from President Zelensky almost just ask for help, where he said the situation is dramatic on the ground in Ukraine and the United States has to lead this. We know that you're deploying big weapons into the country. Can you debrief what's going into Ukraine?
We have been very, very focused on trying to get Ukraine the kinds of material, weapons, and systems that we know that they are using quite effectively in the field to defend themselves. So we've talked about Stinger missiles. We've talked about Javelin anti-tank missiles. We're also working with allies and partners to see what other capabilities and systems they might have that the Ukrainians could use, for instance, in the area of air defense. And so we're having these active conversations right now. We're also helping to coordinate the delivery of nations' material to Ukraine, not just ours, but others as well.
And, sir, we see the Ukrainians are fighting like hell. It's been 3 weeks. I mean, they really fight for almost an existential question of their country. How do you see the state of this army?
They are fighting very bravely, very valiantly, and what we would say is also creatively. They're using their superior knowledge of the terrain and their own geography, as well as their nimble behavior in terms of using these systems they're getting quite effectively, and they have essentially stalled the Russian advance. Now, again, we're going to contribute, the United States, contribute to that effort by them. You saw President Biden announce another $800 million. That brings to $2 billion in just the last year that the United States has given in security assistance to Ukraine, because we know that they are good at using these systems in the field.
And President Putin, of course, yesterday gave out a speech. The content of that speech was quite something, where he talked about Russia will prevail here and we are going to meet our goals. How concerned are you about the response from Russia?
What we have not seen, the Russians, for all the talk about wanting to find a diplomatic path forward, we haven't seen them act on that.
You don't believe that?
There's ceasefire talks going on, and of course we support that, and we want to see a negotiated settlement. That's the way forward here. But what you're seeing by the Russians on the ground is a full-on commitment to military operations. They continue to hammer cities like Kharkiv, Cherniyiv, Mariupol, Kyiv with long-range fires. That's a fancy Pentagon word for bombardment by missiles and rocket systems. And they just, you've seen it for yourself, how much damage and death and destruction they're causing. So while at one time they say they want to find a negotiated settlement, they are militarily continuing to try to press for advantage and causing an amazing amount of death and destruction in the wake.
You haven't seen any change over the past 48 hours?
No, the fighting continues. I mean, again, you guys with cameras on the ground can see that for yourself. The fighting continues, the death and destruction continues, and what we would say is that one of the options Mr. Putin still has available to him, and he's got lots of military options, but he also has the option of a peaceful negotiated settlement, and we would like to see those efforts really bear fruit in some sort of earnest way.
And the United States has made that very clear a number of times, but I wonder, you're here and you were telling me off camera you're going to Bulgaria, you're going to Slovakia.
That's right.
Why are you doing this? What's your message you're trying to say, particularly to Eastern Europeans?
Secretary Austin's message here at NATO was obviously that the United States is going to continue to do what we have to do to bolster the NATO defensive and deterrence capabilities, particularly along the eastern flank. We've added almost 20,000 now, more U.S. troops to Europe than before the invasion. And so we're going to Slovakia next this afternoon, and then Bulgaria the next day, to very, very important NATO allies on the eastern flank. We're going to reinforce that message. We're going to make sure they know that we're willing to continue to talk to them about their deterrence and defense needs, and if there's other ways that the United States can help.
And do the Russians get that? Because we saw on Saturday that there was an explosion that happened very close to Poland. Poland is surrounded by Belarus and Ukraine. Yeah. In your mind, do Russians get that message? Do not play any games on NATO grounds.
We have been very clear with Mr. Putin and with the Russians, both in private conversations and certainly with our public messaging, that the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory. We take our Article 5 commitments to this alliance extremely seriously. That's why Secretary Austin has been here for 2 days, and that's why we're making these 2 other stops on NATO's eastern flank.
And, sir, just as a final question, when you speak to officials from Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, they do worry, however, that the war could escalate into their territory.
Sure.
Do you fear a spillover from this war, which is horrific? I mean, we've seen the pictures.
Nobody wants to see this war escalate beyond where it is, and it's already escalated to a degree. You can look and see what's happening in Ukraine. Again, the death and destruction that the Russians are causing. Nobody wants to see it escalate beyond that. That's in nobody's interest, and that's why, again, our message to NATO has been very strong, very clear, very concise. We're going to make sure that we can defend NATO territory.